Welcome to today's webinar on building healthy relationships. It's great to have you all there. I'm the presenter today. My name's Kim Repchak, and it's a pleasure to have our presenter Helen Diamond from Centre Care Ballarat on board with us today. A great topic. We always start off with an acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners and custodians past and present on land of which we are on today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to the country and respect the cultural authority for the elders in each community. Thank you. So with pleasure, excuse me, frog in my throat, I'd like to introduce Helen Diamond from Centre Care Ballarat. I might just turn my camera off now if that's okay. Hi,
Hello,
Helen.
everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me along today.
I'd like to introduce Helen. Helen's employed by Centre Care at Ballarat as a family relationships worker. Helen's been supporting families for over 23 years, which is an amazing length of time. During this time, Helen, I'd imagine you've met lots of couples and have provided them with lots of support, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful privilege. I've had the great pleasure of meeting many couples, parents and families who are all grappling with the universal challenges that all families face from time to time. In all of these interactions, the importance of relationships is brought into focus. As we know that if relationships are nurtured and strengthened, the physical, emotional and psychological well-being of everyone flourishes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just thought I'd also mention that we have Nicola Graham who will be assisting us today with some polls. So throughout the presentation, to engage the audience and get you involved, we'd like you to vote. So you'll be prompted to answer a question with a response, and Nicola Graham's helping us with those today. It's just so we can make it as interactive as possible. So thanks everybody. I might now hand over to you, Helen.
Sure.
So you can share your slides.
Yes, thank you, Kim. Oh, here we are. There we are. Yep. Okay, so I might turn myself off and we'll just go with these slides. So it's lovely to be part of the presentation today. I thought we'd just start off with some learning objectives. So what I hope that by the end of our time together, those of you who are participating in the webinar will have come away with is an understanding of the key components of a healthy relationship using what's known as the Sound Relationship House model as devised by Dr. John Gottman, who is an American psychologist who's been studying relationships for a very, very long time, but more of that later.
Helen, sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Just we can't see your screen at the moment, so you've got a little button there to show your screen. It's underneath. That's it. Beautiful. Thank you, Helen.
Sorry about that. Yes, so also to understand love languages and how to use these to enhance your relationship, to identify the warning signs in couple relationships and how to manage and resolve conflict, and to reflect on your own relationship, to really have a think about what's working well and also what might enhance your relationship. And hopefully a lot of what we cover today will be an affirmation for you that your couple relationship is on the right track. But as with
Helen,
all relationships, yeah.
It's just a comment, Helen, it's Kim here.
Yeah.
Often people describe multiple sclerosis as an uninvited guest who shows up at the house one day and tends to take up space in every room and never goes away. This can have a huge impact on a couple's relationship. People often talk about the person with MS has MS, but it affects the whole relationship. And that's where we thought inviting you to come along today to look at this framework could be really helpful for couples in supporting each other through a diagnosis of MS.
Yes, oh, that's great. And I think, you know, particularly when you have an added challenge in your couple relationship, such as a diagnosis of MS, this is the sort of framework that could hopefully be really helpful, because it's quite easy to comprehend, and there's lots of practical suggestions that people may choose to implement as we go along. So, Kim, did you want to talk to the poll?
Absolutely. I thought just so that we can all start to think about our relationships, and because we're building on our relationships, I'd like you to look at these questions here. So what's working well in your relationship? If you could select perhaps 2 options here. So our communication, we manage conflict well, we enjoy spending time together, sex and intimacy, we value the same things. If people could put their responses in, perhaps the 2 things that you feel at the moment that are working well.
Thanks, everybody. So I've just launched that poll for you, and I can see lots of people have voted already. So we've got 50% of people have voted. So if you can just vote and pop your response in, I'll just give you a couple more moments. We can't see, it's totally anonymous, so feel free to put in whatever you want, and I'll close that poll shortly. So there's just a few more people to vote, and then we'll be ready to share the information. Okay, that's fantastic. I'm just going to close that poll now, and I'm going to share the results of that. Kim, can you see the results, or just me?
I sure can. So that's really interesting. So yeah, we've got 77% enjoy spending time together, 54 our communication, 46 we value the same things, and then we have 15% sex and intimacy, and 8% we manage conflict well. Are they interesting results given what you see in supporting couples, Helen?
Well, it's actually lovely to think that so many people enjoy spending time together. I think that is a bit surprising. It's great because with a lot of couple relationships, spending time together is often one of the things that seems to sort of drop off the agenda as we get so caught up in our busy lives. So that's absolutely delightful. It's interesting, I think, that 8% said the managing conflict. So that's obviously an area perhaps where quite a few people would like to focus their attention. Communication, that's great. I think it was 46% with communication. So, you know, that it sounds as if for most of the people participating in today's webinar that things are sort of going okay for them, which I think is a really lovely point to start from.
And also, Helen, we wanted to look at building. So the framework around what's working well and what can we keep working well.
Absolutely.
Which follows on with our next poll question, which is, what would you like to work on? Is it your communication? Is it how you manage conflict? Is it spending more time together? Is it more intimacy? Is it sharing your values? So if you could please perhaps select one option here of something you'd like to build on.
Thanks again, guys. I can see 53% of people have voted already, so you've got really fast at this now. And 80% of people have voted now. So just a couple more people. I'll give you a little bit more time, and then we'll close this poll and share our responses. Okay, that's great. Just sharing the results now. Over to you,
Right.
Kim.
So it's interesting, and I guess it's a little bit the opposite of what we saw before. So it's 50% would like to work on conflict management, 33% would like to work on more sex and intimacy, and 8 on values, and 8 on spending time together. What are your thoughts, Helen, on that?
Well, yeah, as you said, Kim, it sort of is like the flip side of the previous poll question in a way. And I think just even having time to think about the areas that you'd like to work on and acknowledging them is possibly the first step in working towards, you know, strengthening your relationship in those regards. And once again, hopefully some of the content that we covered today may support people to move a little bit closer to those areas that they'd like to build on.
And Helen, it's interesting when you think about it that it can be tied together in that if you're in conflict, then it's common that the intimacy goes out the window.
Absolutely. I think that's a great observation. Yes, not many of us feel like being close and intimate with our relationships if we're feeling pretty snitchy towards them or quite irritable towards them. So if we're able to talk about ways of managing conflict, as you pointed out, there will be a greater chance that you'll feel closer to your partner. And of course, we know that when we do work through some really difficult issues, we usually do feel closer to our partners because we've got through a really challenging time and we've come to some sort of agreement and arrangement, and we feel as if we're back on the same page a little bit. So that can also be one of the positive outcomes of experiencing some conflict once we've sort of managed it to a certain extent. Okay, shall we move on? So the rest of the presentation today is going to be based on what's known as a sound relationship house model. And this is a model that was devised by John Gottman, who has been studying relationships and marital satisfaction for almost 50 years. He's come up with the terms masters and disasters of marriage, which indicate what works and what doesn't work to keep a relationship stable and happy. The masters of relationships stay together and are reasonably satisfied with their relationship, and the disasters are couples whose relationship eventually ends or who have stayed together but are miserable. And Gottman can predict with 94% accuracy which couples will stay together and which will get divorced. So as you can imagine, we find all his research extremely useful. And he's structured all his findings about what really supports couples to become masters of relationships in this framework of a house. So starting from the foundation upwards, we're working towards really strengthening our connection. So the first level of the house is build love maps. And this is the foundation and the main concept of a strong connection with your partner. So being interested in and curious about your partner is so important, and by being interested and curious, you can make a bit of a roadmap of their psychological world. Now remember back to when you were first getting to know each other and every detail about the other person was fascinating and exciting. That's what we're wanting to recapture, that curiosity and interest in our partner in order to develop that map of their psychological world. So to do this, we need to really rev up our curiosity. We need to set aside our preconceived assumptions and ask open-ended questions. So you can actually change the course of your relationship simply by shifting from statements to open-ended questions. For example, the questions might be about your partner's day, their interests and preferences, their views on a topic or their aspirations. And we've got some examples here on the screen that you might even want to jot down, or I think they'll probably be in your handouts. But just, really being curious about your partner and being interested. And I know that the longer you're in a relationship, the more you feel as if you know your partner, but it really is very helpful to strengthen that friendship by continuing to be curious about their world.
And Helen, I think it's promising that many people mention that communication is working really well. So that's a really good springboard to start chatting about these things.
Absolutely, and it's probably something that will come quite naturally to you. And some of you are all probably already doing this. So if you are already doing this, I think it's a great affirmation that you really are on the right track with your relationship. Okay, so the second level of the Sound Relationship House involves sharing fondness and admiration. So this level is about building a culture of appreciation, fondness, affection, and respect with your partner. And the more you notice the ways your partner contributes to your life and your couple relationship, the more satisfied you'll feel in your relationship. So the masters of relationships are known to express affection and respect during very ordinary moments. Those sort of incidental connections, you know, your partner might make you a cup of tea to be able to thank them and show your appreciation. You know, or they might pick a bunch of flowers from the garden. Those sorts of small moments are great opportunities for sharing fondness and admiration. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourselves is to make your relationship less critical. So what we'd like you to do today is to have a look at some of the adjectives we've compiled and to choose 3 characteristics that describe your partner and maybe jot them down. Or if you can think of other characteristics that aren't listed, of course, you know, jot down the 3 that you admire, 3 things that you admire about your partner. And of course, these can change from day to day. Some days it might be really easy to think of some, other days, obviously, it might be a little bit more difficult to adopt this approach. And then what we'd like you to do is to think about an incident when your partner displayed these characteristics and it pleased you. So for example, it might be a time when your partner knew that you'd had a really busy and stressful day and cooked dinner that night. So to be able to, you know, show your appreciation for their thoughtfulness in that instance. Or it might be, you know, being really appreciative of the way your partner handled a difficult situation with one of your children, to be able to reflect back to them, you know, how much you appreciated their empathic and insightful approach. So it's really being able to become quite specific about what it is about your partner that you really admire.
And Helen, it'd be a good habit to get into maybe once a day of trying to identify this and bring in that positivity.
Absolutely, I think it's fantastic. And the thing about all of these sorts of approaches is, as with everything, the more we get into the swing of doing it, the easier it becomes. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but a lot of the things that we're talking about with relation to the couple relationship also work really, really well with the parenting relationship. So for those of you who are parents, you might also want to consider some of these approaches with relation to the relationship you have with your children. Level 3 is turn towards instead of away. So in all relationships, we make what are known as bids for connection, where we say or do something that's aimed at getting the attention of the other person, thereby enhancing our connection. So for example, your partner might say, "Looks like it's going to be a lovely day." And you actually have 3 choices as to how you respond to this comment. So an example of turning towards your partner and showing some interest and taking time to connect and respond could be something like, "Yeah, it does. have you got anything planned? Or maybe we could make the most of it and go for a walk. So you're actually letting them know that you've heard them and that you're sort of picking up the ball and running with it. The second option we have is to turn away. So that could just be ignoring the comment, or it could just be being on automatic pilot, just saying something like, "Oh, that's nice, dear." You know, so you're not really getting in there and being enthusiastic. And the third choice we have is to actually turn against, and you know, that's to respond in an irritable, negative kind of way. So it could be something like, "Well, who cares about the weather? Haven't you got anything better to think about?" So you can see that, you know, just from that very small example, the sort of connection that we're making with our partner will be a very different one depending on how we choose to respond to them. So often the difference between turning towards and turning away or turning against is just a little bit of thoughtfulness. So to actually be a little more intentional in the way in which we respond to our partner when they do make a bid for connection. Okay. So we're going to just have a little diversion from the Sound Relationship House to talk a bit about what's known as love languages. They fit in very well with Gottman's concept, but they've actually been devised by another person, Gary Chapman, who has written several books on the subject, and it's based on the idea that we all have preferred ways of showing love to others. And if we can determine our partner's love language, we can then make more meaningful deposits into their emotional bank account. So Gary Chapman has come up with 5 love languages, which are fairly self-explanatory. So the acts of service could be that whole idea that actions speak louder than words. So it could be making your partner a cup of tea, or taking on one of the jobs that the other person usually does, or doing things to ease the other person's burden or to make life a little bit easier for yourselves as a couple or the family. Gift giving is an expression of thoughtfulness and also an expression of love, which demonstrates to the other person that they're thought of, that they're cared for, and that they're cherished. Words of affirmation can be anything from love notes, text messages, cards, phone calls, or face-to-face expressions of love, and letting the other person know the reason that you love and admire them. Physical touch can be hugs, pats on the back, head massages, hand holding, as well as sex. And quality time is giving the other person your full, undivided attention. So if you have a bit of an idea of what your partner's love language is, or you know how they like to show love, then you can choose to show them love in the way that's really going to make a meaningful impact for them. I've got an example from my own relationship, which I would be happy to share with you. I've sort of called it the clothes horse story, a case of misunderstood love languages. Just a bit of background, we moved to wet, wintry Ballarat about 27 years ago from Melbourne with our 3 young children. And after a couple of years of struggling with the endless stream of laundry, you know, that never seemed to dry no matter how long it was sort of left outside, my husband decided that he would build an apparatus that would fit next to our wood heater, which would hopefully speed up the whole drying process and make our lives a little less stressful. Now, this is a photo of it in its present iteration when Tony built it. It was actually originally twice the size of this and painted bright blue. It was huge. It just dominated the whole of our living room, and we sort of called it the Trojan clothes horse. It was just enormous. So Tony spent many a long hour over many weekends slaving away on this project. He is not a natural carpenter, so it did take him a long time. While he was slaving away over this, I spent many a long hour in our house seething and feeling really resentful about the time that he was spending away in the shed when he could have been spending time with us as a family. So it was a little bone of contention between us for quite some time. However, since learning about love languages, I can now see that Tony was expressing his love for us by making the clothes horse, which was going to assist with the functioning of the household, and that this was actually an act of service. For me, my love language is quality time, so not having him be fully present was a massive source of frustration. You know, how come he wasn't hanging around with us? So it sort of explained how conflicted and tense we felt about something that was probably quite innocuous, you know, as the clothes horse. But to suffice to say, both the clothes horse and our relationship has weathered the test of time, strengthened by an understanding of where we're both coming from and what our intentions and needs are. I've got another example. Oh, no, sorry, Kim, we're going to the poll question.
I think that's fine. We can do that as well, Helen, but perhaps before we do, I know you did have an example that we chatted about, and it was very pertinent because it was in relation to a couple you were supporting where one of the members had MS. So yeah, I'd be happy for you to share that story.
Okay, so okay. So I'm not sure. Okay, sorry for flipping around like that. I think we've skipped a slide. Anyway, so yes, just back to this couple I met a few years ago. They were struggling with different love languages. The woman had MS, and one of her symptoms was that she always felt really hot and fatigued, and any close contact with her partner made her feel really uncomfortable, as well as the fact that she was usually exhausted by the end of the day. So as you can imagine, any sort of physical contact or any physical overtures made by her partner were not always responded to in a positive manner. Unfortunately for them, it became apparent that her partner's love language was physical touch. So he was really affected by what he saw as his partner's rejection of him. Her love language was acts of service. She really appreciated his assistance with household chores and, you know, just sort of helping around the place. And after they discovered this about each other, they were able to come up with a bit of a plan whereby he assisted unprompted with as many chores as he was able, which then led to her feeling less tired and appreciative and, you know, grateful for her partner's help and assistance. And so at the end of the day, she was sometimes more inclined to enjoy the physical touch side of things. She had a little bit more energy, and, you know, her emotional bank account had been topped up by him helping out around the house. But of course, there were still times where they miscommunicated their needs. But once again, I think this was quite a good example of understanding, being able to understand where your partner is coming from, which can really help to keep that couple connection.
Yeah, that's so important. And again, communication. And perhaps in setting the scene for this, it'd be great for people to think about, what do you think is your preferred love language for you? What's your preferred way of, you know, in love language terms? Is it quality time? Is it words of affirmation? Is it gift giving? Is it acts of service? Is it physical touch? If people could vote what their preferred love language is, that'd be great.
So it's really about the way that you show others that you love for them,
Great.
that
So
you
whether
love
you,
them.
yep. So whether you show it by physical touch, acts of service, gift giving, words of affection, or quality time.
That's great, guys. So we've had 75% of people have voted. So just give a little bit more time for a few more people to vote, and then we'll share those responses. That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share that information.
Great.
You see that, Kim?
Yeah, I sure can. So we've got, as you can see there, 57% quality time, 14% words of affirmation, 14% physical touch, 7% acts of service, 7% gift giving. Is that interesting to note, Helen, in the work that you do with couples?
Well, it is, and I suppose the thing is that we're all such individuals, and of course, we're all going to have different ways of showing our love. But I think it's interesting that there was such a large proportion of people who really value quality time, which might also link back into the fact that quite a lot of people said that their communication was going really well, because if you're able to spend that quality time with your partner, then there's a good chance that your communication will be enhanced. Yeah, I was a little surprised that acts of service was 7%, because I think for a lot of us, I guess it depends on our life stage. I know, when you've got little children, there's nothing better than being able to have someone give you a hand around the house. So perhaps, we might be talking about a different demographic here. The gift giving, I think, sort of fits quite well. I think probably for most people, that's sort of like the icing on the cake in a way, and it's something that we practice at certain times, through birthdays and Christmases. Words of affirmation and physical touch are about the same. So yeah, I think the standout there is the quality time.
Absolutely. And I think we had a second poll in line with this.
Yes, we did.
And it's really getting you to think about, do you know your partner's preferred love language? And if you can vote now, whether you yes or no, or you're unsure, do you know what their preferred love language is?
That's great. Just over half of our listeners have voted. Oh, and right up to 88% of people have voted now. So that's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to close this poll and share the results.
And that's interesting too, Helen, and it's good news in that there's 79% do know their partner's preferred love language, 14% no, and 7% aren't sure. But that's really positive, isn't it?
It is, it definitely is. And perhaps after today, you might like to do some more investigation into the whole concept of love languages. And if your partners aren't watching or taking part in the webinar, you might like to perhaps do some exploration together and delve a little bit deeper into that, because it certainly is something that's very, very helpful in really building those connections between couples. Thank you for that. We'll move along, moving up the levels of the house. We're up to level 4, which is the positive perspective. So the positive perspective can only occur when all the previous levels of the sound relationship house are functioning well. Having a positive perspective means believing in your relationship and giving your partner the benefit of the doubt when things go wrong. And Gottman says that in relationships, you need a habit of mind that scans the world for things to appreciate rather than things to criticize. So it could be really helpful to use positive emotion like humour, interest, affection and empathy, and to express appreciation and gratitude. And everyone's probably very aware of the value of gratitude. it really does go a long way in supporting your positive feelings towards your partner. And I'd really love to encourage you now just to take a couple of moments to jot down 3 things that you feel grateful for in your relationship today.
It's interesting, Helen, while people are thinking about that, even that practice of thinking about what you're grateful for, because I think when we're busy and stressed, it's the last thing we do. We're looking at the negative, and we're not looking for the positive.
It's so true, and it is. It's so much easier in some ways to go straight to the things that are really irking you and that are really irritating you and that you're feeling very sort of negative about. But the more we can practice looking for some of the brighter aspects of our relationship, the more we end up actually being able to see them. So to be able to practice this on a daily basis would just be ideal, you know, to even make it part of a little bit of a routine or ritual with your partner to sit down and talk about the things that you are grateful for in your day. And once again, this is also something that's a really lovely thing to do with children as well. Okay, so one of the main sort of concepts when it comes to repairing any sort of ruptures that may happen in our relationships is what's known as repair attempts. So a rupture can be anything that sort of takes us away from feeling connected to our partner. So it could be a disagreement, it could be saying or doing something that we really regret, could be taking our eye off the ball. You know, we get distracted with other aspects of our life and really not sort of paying as much focus or heed to our relationship. And so it happens to all of us in relationships. And I think the important thing is to recognize that we have caused a rupture, and then the next step is to think about what we can do to repair that rupture. So a repair attempt is any effort that you do to de-escalate the tension between the two of you. So it might be an apology, it might be smiling at your partner, anything that's going to break the tension. So you might say, you know, can I take that back? Or I'm sorry I spoke so harshly. Or it could be making a request of them. So please be gentler with me, or please help me calm down. And Gottman has found that the masters of relationships have quite a lot of different repair attempts in their pockets for when the time is needed. You know, it might be something as simple as just to say to your partner, how about we put the kettle on and have a cup of tea? Anything that's just going to sort of bring you back in line with each other. It's a really important relationship tool to have in your toolkit. So moving along to level 5 of the house, managing conflict. So if we've got those previous levels pretty well in place, then it means that we're more likely to be able to manage conflict with our partner in a way that's going to be respectful and it's going to sort of nurture our relationship rather than inflict great wounds on the relationship. Gottman, from his research, has said that the #1 warning sign in a relationship is that there are more negatives than positives. And he's identified 4 warning signs, which he has dubbed the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And they are criticism and harsh startups, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So we'll go over these, but if these are more present in relationships, then it's a real warning sign that couples really need to focus on the antidotes, the things that they can do to work on regaining the positives in their relationships. So the first one, criticism and harsh startup. We probably are all familiar with them, and apparently, according to Gottman's research, women are more likely to do this more often than men. And I think sometimes it might be, you know, that we've been stewing on something during the course of our day, and when we see our partner, they walk in the door and we just let them have it because it's been something that's been building up for us. Responding like that usually never gets a very rational sort of response from your partner. So an example of a criticism and a harsh startup could be something like, how many times do I have to tell you to pick up your wet towels, you lazy slob? So that's really playing the person, and it's being very critical about them. Gottman's antidote to that is to discuss specific behaviours and make what he calls complaints rather than criticism, and to try to stay calm as much as possible. So an alternative approach to that sort of situation could be something like, I feel really irritated when there are wet towels left on the bathroom floor, and I would appreciate it if you could put them on the towel rail after you've used them. So in that instance, you're owning your feelings, and you're also describing the situation that you would like changed, as well as making a suggestion as to what your partner could be doing. So, you know, I think it's wonderful with these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that we have these antidotes. So yes, we might catch ourselves doing some of these more negative interactions, but to know that there are other ways of behaving and interacting, I think is really, really valuable. So the second and probably the most toxic of the 4 horsemen is contempt. And this is a very, very toxic warning sign. It's been found to have a really detrimental impact on the recipient's psychological, emotional, and physical well-being. It's really, really, really poisonous for the relationship. And it's often characterized by the eyeball roll, superiority, put downs, taking the high moral ground, you know, telling the other person that they're hopeless and that they're just like their father or their mother, those sorts of really mean sorts of responses. And the antidote is to make repair attempts, to accept influence, and to focus on the positive perspective. Gottman also says that when men can actually accept influence from women, that seems to be a really positive indicator that the relationship's going well. So, for example, if the woman says something like, oh, I was thinking of getting some new curtains for the lounge room, if her partner's able to say, oh, okay, that sounds interesting, tell me a little bit more about that, rather than, you know, shutting them down and saying, well, why would you want new curtains? These ones are perfectly fine. So, you know, to actually be able to sort of step into their world and see where they're coming from is really, really helpful.
Yes, Helen, empathy really plays a big part there, doesn't it? Seeing it from the other person's perspective.
It certainly does, and I think empathy plays a huge part in all aspects of our relationships, whether they are with partners, whether they're with friends, family, or work colleagues. Being able to really step into that other person's shoes and try to have a bit of a sense of where they're coming from really supports retaining a connection and gaining a sense of understanding, which I think is really, really helpful.
And just quickly, I know we're going through the webinar morning really quickly, but often for people with MS, they talk about their symptoms being invisible. And that's where I think it's really important to communicate your needs and how you're feeling, because your partner may not be able to see that.
That's such a great idea. And sometimes if we don't communicate things clearly, our partner can misinterpret our body language and our actions, and can really end up going off on a completely different sort of tangent, and thinking that things perhaps are much worse than they are, or just really not being clear. So yeah, I think it's each person's responsibility to try and be as clear as possible in a respectful way about what their needs are. The next member of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is defensiveness. So that's denying responsibility for the problem, saying to the other person, you made me do it, or, you made me feel like that. And the antidote is to accept responsibility for the problem. And I think, in some ways, that's probably one of the biggest indicators of being a grown-up in relationships, to really be able to cop it on the chin and acknowledge when you've had a role to play in some misunderstanding or some of the conflict. The final component of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is what Gottman calls stonewalling. So it's withdrawing from the interaction, feeling overwhelmed, flooded, so going into that fight or flight mode, heading for the shed, or doing whatever it takes to hide your overwhelm. And this often happens more with men. They experience what's known as diffuse physiological arousal, which means that their blood pressure rises, their heartbeat rises, and they get into that sort of fight or flight mode where they can't actually think clearly. It often happens as a response to their partner doing the harsh startup, having a bit of a go at them as soon as they set foot in the door. And the antidote is to take a 20-minute break in order to calm down. So to be able to just take some time to calm down and to then return to the conversation at hand. Because as we all know, there really is no use trying to continue a conversation if both parties are really distressed and heightened. And in fact, John Gottman, when he works with couples, he has each of them wear a monitor which monitors their pulse rate. And as soon as the pulse rate gets to 100 beats per minute, he calls the session off and makes sure that the couples calm down. So, if you're feeling really sort of worked up, it's probably really useful just to call time out and do whatever you need to do to calm down before continuing the conversation.
It sort of gives you time, Helen, for your mind to catch up with your body, so you can be a bit more clear in what you're saying. I think every argument, when you look back, you think, oh, if only I'd just taken a breath, I would have said something differently.
Yeah. And I think, once again, such an important idea for us as parents too. If our children have been pushing our buttons all around the place before we react, if we can take just a few moments to calm down, then we're more likely to be able to respond in an intentional and mindful way. So yeah, it's a really great skill to adopt, not to get caught in the soup, but to really be able to build a bit of a pause between reacting and responding. So our level 6, coming to the top of the house, is making life dreams come true. So this step is about creating the necessary conditions for each member of the relationship to be able to honour one another's life dreams. So it takes love maps to a deeper level and involves the past and the present, as well as your hopes and dreams for the future. It's about getting to the core of who your partner is and what they value and what they want to see demonstrated in their relationships and in their life. And this is where what Gottman calls that 20-minute stress-reducing conversation is very helpful. And I think also from the earlier poll, knowing that quite a lot of people viewing this webinar or participating in this webinar today feel that communication is going really well for them. This is like the icing on the cake to really be able to enhance that communication and really be able to talk to each other about the things that are really important to you. It's sort of taking things to that next level with your relationship. And the final level, the tip of the house, is creating shared meaning. So this involves creating rituals of connection, you know, patterns and rhythms in your relationship that are predictable and comforting to both parties. It can lead to a greater stability in your relationship. It helps couples settle conflicts, and it helps couples pursue goals together that are important to them. So, you know, it could be something as simple as having a cup of tea or coffee together, or a drink at the end of the day. It might be, you know, carving out 20 minutes a day to sit and talk about your day. It could be, you know, going on a walk together every day, or doing a crossword, you know, whatever it is that's going to bring you together and, you know, sustain the relationship would be what I'd be encouraging. Those rituals are really, really important. So that's the sound relationship in a nutshell. But what I'd like to leave everyone with is this idea of who you want to be in your relationship. So I'd like you to imagine that it's your 40th wedding anniversary and your partner takes the floor to make a speech about you and the things that they value and appreciate about you. And what I'd like you to do is to think about how you would like your partner to describe you in this instance. So what sort of words would you like them to use when they're talking about the sort of partner you've been to them? Doesn't necessarily mean that you are actually like this now. It's more about how you'd like to be described. So you might like to take some time to jot this down, or perhaps you might like to do this after the webinar. But what you're doing is actually clarifying your values and what represents to you as being the most important factors in a relationship. So for example, if you wanted to be described as, if you'd like your partner to be described as being kind and generous, and you may not feel as if you're actually that kind and generous at the moment, it could be like a bit of a blueprint to help point you in the direction of how you would like to be remembered. So it might be just a bit of a reminder that, yep, I'd like to be described as kind and generous, so I'm going to choose to smile at my partner, or I'm going to offer them, you know, this half of my muffin, or I'm, you know, just those little small acts of kindness can go a long way. So it's just a way of really just thinking about, taking time to think about who you'd like to be and what you might need to be doing more of, or what you might like to be doing less of, or also what you'd just like to be doing exactly the same as it is, because you might feel as if, you know, you're doing pretty well in your relationship. So that has concluded my section of the webinar.
Thanks, Helen. That's amazing. Lots of great ideas and really easy tools to use, but really good reminders of, I think, how to communicate and show love, and so important. I just wondered at this point if we might pause and just see if there's any questions that our audience has. So if anyone's got any questions,
Sure.
they can type that into the question box and we can read them out. I thought while people are doing that, I also thought it might be good to go on to the next slide. I might actually take over the slides if that's okay,
Sure.
Helen. I'll just
Yeah.
change presenter. I might just get you to talk while I'm setting up, Helen.
Sure.
Is if you could talk
Okay.
about, if people are probably thinking, where do I go? My relationship perhaps needs a little bit of work. Where's a
Yeah.
good place to start? Is there, I know through MS Connect, people can ring in and have a chat to the social worker there and look at where they can link into some counselling.
Yep.
So I was thinking that perhaps, are there other resources that people can utilise beyond today's
Yes,
webinar?
absolutely. For some couples, it can be really helpful to see your GP, and they can give you what's known as a mental health plan, which can then support you to have some sessions with a counsellor. If you're not at that stage yet, but you'd like to sort of find out a little bit more information about some of the things that we've talked about, there's a wonderful resource which is the Gottman Institute, and you can follow that on Facebook or Instagram, and they post really, really interesting articles about relationships. They also have a podcast called Small Things Often, I think, which might be also something that you might like to investigate. But yeah, I think it's a great idea to have a bit of a tune-up with your relationship. It doesn't have to get to the point where you're feeling really, really desperate and, you know, facing heaps and heaps of challenges. Sometimes it can just be really helpful to talk to a third party who's not intimately involved, who can provide a safe space for you to talk about your relationship, once again looking at the things that are working really well, as well as the areas that you'd like to build on.
Fantastic. And on my slide here, I've got some resources that you've just mentioned, Helen, the Gottman Institute, where you can follow on Facebook, Instagram, signing up for the Marriage Minute, the Love Maps app, which I've got, which is fantastic, which prompts you with some questions around the love languages and also some ideas for date nights and all sorts of wonderful things that may not even enter your mind. So the Love Maps app, which you can get on any app store, which is great. And the Gottman's Card Deck is another great app that you can access. And as you've mentioned throughout, Gary Chapman also has lots of information on the net around the love languages. So just noting, Nicola, do you see any other questions here that would like to be answered? Are there any other questions, Nicola?
I think just briefly, Helen, if you could answer Rowena's. She said how to manage the ever-increasing relationship your partner or children have with screens and mobiles, and I think we all can relate to that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Because they really distract from that opportunity to connect, don't they? They're the perfect barriers to communication and feeling close to others. I suppose it really comes back to being able to talk openly and honestly about the impact that such devices are having on your relationship. With partners, to perhaps to come to some agreement that there might be some screen-free time where you set aside all of those sorts of diversions to really just be with each other in the good old-fashioned way of, you know, sitting next to each other on the couch and having a bit of a chat. It's really, really difficult with children because, of course, it's become such a huge part of children's culture and their way of connecting socially. But I guess it depends on different families and different families' values. But if it's something that you feel really strongly about, perhaps it might be worth coming together as a family and just saying, you know, we really need to have some time every day where we're talking, where we're connecting without any sort of distraction. But yes, I can definitely relate to that. It's a real connection killer, isn't it?
Thanks so much, Helen. Lots of great information. This is a tape recording, so if people want to access this down the track, they certainly can. And of course, the handouts go into more detail. So thanks again, Helen, a great session.
That's my pleasure, Kim. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this today.
Great. And I just wanted to highlight some of the MS services. Of course, there's MS Connect. If you would like more information beyond today of accessing counselling and support, they're a great advice line. They have nurses and social workers that you can link in with. We also have peer support, to which I'm coordinator for Victoria, which offers face-to-face support groups, including a carers group. We have groups where you and your partner can go to, such as dinner groups and coffee groups. We also have phone support where I can link you in with another partner or a person with MS to share support. We have tele groups and, of course, Facebook. There's a Get Your Act Together tool, which looks at support around MS symptom management, and you can access through our website. Of course, we have our employment support service, which is fantastic in helping people to maintain work, but also look for work. There's a great link on our website, which highlights people using that service. So I totally encourage you to look at that. Of course, we're a registered NDIS provider, so if you need assistance around funding for supports, please link in. It's just a phone call to MS Connect. And if you need support, if you or your partner's over 65, then you can certainly speak to MS Connect about My Aged Care. And a big thank you to everyone for participating today. If you could stay online after the webinar and complete the survey, that'd be great. And also just wanted to let you know that there is a great podcast on sex and sexuality on our website. If you Google podcasts, you'll see it there. And there's also a fantastic podcast also done by Helen on building healthy relationships. So if you'd like to link on that, again, go to the website and search in podcasts. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great day. Bye.